The wedding dress felt like a noose. Elena Whitlock stood in front of the mirror, silk and lace wrapped tight around her ribs, and realized with perfect, brutal clarity she was being sold. Not married, sold. Her father had gambled away everything, and she was the final chip pushed across the table to a man whose cruelty was whispered about in every drawing room from here to the capital. In 2 hours, she would belong to Lord Harrington. In 2 hours, her life would end. So she ran, out the window, through the rain, past the guards who didn't expect a bride in full regalia to bolt like a criminal. She ran until her lungs screamed, until her wedding slippers shredded on cobblestone, until she saw the carriage, black, sleek, marked with a crest she didn't recognize but feared instinctively. She threw herself inside, and came face to face with a man even more dangerous than the one she was running from. If you want to see how a girl who had nothing left to lose became the one woman a duke couldn't control, stay with me. Drop a like, tell me what city you're watching from, and let's see how far this story can go. The carriage door slammed shut behind her with a sound like a coffin closing. Elena collapsed onto the velvet seat, gasping, soaked to the bone, her wedding dress clinging to her like a second skin made of shame and desperation. Rain hammered the roof. Her heartbeat hammered her skull. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, she let herself believe she'd made it. Then she looked up. He sat across from her in the shadows, perfectly still. A man carved from winter and weaponry. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black from collar to boot. His face was half lit by the dim carriage lamp, sharp jaw, aristocratic nose, mouth set in a line that had forgotten how to smile. And a scar, a brutal one, dragged across his left cheek from temple to chin, pale against tanned skin. His eyes were worst of all. Gray, cold, the kind of eyes that didn't blink when they ended you. "Well," he said, voice low and smooth as a blade sliding from a sheath, "this is unexpected." Elena's breath caught. She scrambled back against the door, fingers scrabbling for the handle. But it didn't budge. Locked. Of course it was locked. I'm sorry, she stammered, words tripping over themselves. I wasn't. You weren't supposed to dive into a moving carriage like a madwoman? One dark brow arched. No, I imagine you weren't. Ew. Outside shouts erupted, footsteps pounding closer, men's voices cutting through the rain. There! The Whitlock girl! She went this way! Elena's stomach dropped. They were close. Too close. The man across from her didn't move, didn't even glance toward the window. He just watched her, as if she were a puzzle he hadn't decided whether to solve or discard. Please, Elena whispered, hating the crack in her voice, hating how small she sounded. Please, just let me out. I'll disappear. You'll never see me again. Let you out. He repeated it slowly, like he was tasting the idea. Into the arms of the men hunting you? They're not... She stopped, swallowed. It's complicated. Most things are. He leaned forward slightly, just enough that the lamplight caught the full brutal beauty of him, scars and all. But let me simplify this for you, Miss Whitlock. You're in my carriage, uninvited, dripping on my upholstery, and now you want me to throw you back out into the street like unwanted cargo. He knew her name. That should have terrified her more than it did. Instead, it just made her tired. Of course he knew. Everyone knew the Whitlock family. Once great, now ruined. Her father's disgrace was the scandal of the season. Who are you? She asked quietly. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite amusement. Not quite pity. Adrian Blackthorne, he said. Duke of Ravensmore. The name hit her like a fist. She'd heard it before. Everyone had. The scarred duke, the Ice Lord, the man who'd killed 3 men in a duel before he was 21 and walked away without a scratch on his conscience. The man noble families whispered about at parties, half in awe, half in terror. And she'd just thrown herself into his carriage like a gift-wrapped disaster. Oh, she breathed. Oh, no, Oh, yes. His mouth twitched. Almost a smile. Almost. Now, are you going to tell me why Lord Harrington's men are chasing my carriage, or do I have to guess? Before she could answer, a fist pounded on the carriage door. Open up, by order of Lord Harrington. Jarrett Barsham. Elena's whole body went rigid. She looked at the door, then at Adrian, then back at the door. Her mind raced through options and found none. If she stayed, she was trapped with a man who might be worse than the one hunting her. If she left, she was Harrington's property by sunset. Adrian studied her for a long, excruciating moment. Then he leaned back, crossed one leg over the other, and called out in a voice that could have frozen lava, "No!" Silence. Then, "Your Grace, we don't want trouble. We're just here for the girl." "The girl?" Adrian repeated flatly. "You mean the woman currently under my protection?" Elena's eyes snapped to him. "Protection?" "She's a runaway bride, Your Grace. Legally promised to Lord Harrington. We're within our rights. Your rights." Adrian's voice dropped into something dangerous. "And at my carriage door. If Harrington wants to discuss this, he can make an appointment. Until then, you're wasting my time." Another pause, longer this time. Elena could practically hear the men outside weighing their options: chase a fleeing girl or cross a duke who'd buried better men than them. Finally, "Lord Harrington will hear about this." "I'm counting on it." Adrian rapped his knuckles against the wall. "Driver, move!" The carriage lurched forward. Elena grabbed the seat to steady herself, heart still slamming against her ribs. She stared at Adrian, completely lost. "Why did you do that?" He didn't answer immediately, just watched the rain streak down the window, expression unreadable. "You looked," he said eventually, "like you'd rather die than go back." It wasn't a question. Elena swallowed hard. "I would have." He nodded once, as if that settled something. Then he pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and tossed it to her. "You're bleeding. Duki." She looked down. Her hands were scraped raw, palms embedded with bits of gravel from her fall. She hadn't even felt it. Adrenaline, probably. Or shock. Or the fact that she'd burned through so much fear in the last hour that her body had stopped registering pain. She pressed the handkerchief to her worst palm and tried not to think about how expensive it probably was. How out of place she looked here, in this immaculate carriage, wearing a ruined wedding dress and bleeding on a duke's furniture. "I don't understand," she said quietly. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Why would you? I don't like bullies." His voice was flat, final. "And Harrington's a bully with a title. So are you." The words were out before she could stop them. Adrian's gaze slid back to her, sharp as a scalpel. For a heartbeat, she thought she'd made a fatal mistake, that he'd open the door and toss her into the mud after all. Instead, he smiled. It wasn't warm, it wasn't kind, but it was real. "Yes, Mum," he said. "I am, but I'm your bully now, Miss Whitlock. At least until we figure out what to do with you." The Blackthorn estate appeared through the rain like something out of a ghost story. Massive, dark, all sharp angles and iron gates, perched on a hill that looked down on the rest of the world like a predator surveying prey. No welcoming lights in the windows, no flowers in the garden, just stone and shadow and the kind of silence that made you believe in curses. Elena climbed out of the carriage on shaking legs, still clutching Adrian's blood-stained handkerchief. A servant appeared, elderly, stone-faced, holding an umbrella that did nothing to soften the ominous atmosphere. "Prepare the east wing," Adrian said, stepping past him without breaking stride. "And send for the physician." "Your Grace." "Now, Carver." The servant's mouth thinned, but he bowed and disappeared. Adrian glanced back at Elena, who stood frozen on the gravel drive, staring up at the house like it might swallow her whole. "Coming?" She forced her feet to move, followed him up the steps, through doors that groaned like they resented opening, into a foyer that was all marble and cold elegance. Portraits lined the walls, generations of blackthorns, each one looking more severe than the last. "This way." He led her through a maze of hallways, up a staircase wide enough to drive a carriage through, to a door at the far end of the east wing. He pushed it open. The room beyond was not what she expected. Warm, firelight already crackling in the hearth, a four-poster bed draped in deep blue fabric, windows overlooking the gardens, books on the shelves. It looked like someone actually lived here once, cared about it. "You'll stay here," Adrian said. "Carver will bring clothes, food, whatever you need." Elena turned to face him, searching his expression for the catch, the trap. And then what? And then, he said slowly, you tell me the truth, all of it. Why Harrington wants you badly enough to chase you through the rain, what your father did, what you're running from. And if I don't? His smile was thin. Then I'll assume you're more trouble than you're worth, and I'll send you back. Her jaw tightened. You said you'd protect me. I said you were under my protection, past tense. He stepped closer, and suddenly the room felt smaller. If you want it to continue, Miss Whitlock, you'll have to earn it. She should have been afraid, should have backed down. But she'd spent the last month being afraid, and it had gotten her exactly nowhere. So she lifted her chin and met his gaze head on. Fine, she said, but I want something in return. His brow arched. You're in no position to negotiate. Neither are you. She gestured to the window, to the rain, to the world outside. You just made an enemy of Lord Harrington, a powerful one. You don't strike me as the kind of man who makes impulsive decisions, Your Grace, which means you want something from me too. For a long moment, Adrian just looked at her, really looked, like he was seeing her for the first time. Then he laughed, low, rough, surprised. You've got spine, Hitteset, he said. I'll give you that. I've got nothing left to lose, Elena corrected. It makes a difference. Yes. His expression sobered. It does. He moved toward his door, paused with his hand on the frame. Get some rest, Miss Whitlock. We'll talk in the morning. Wait. He glanced back. Elena hesitated, then asked the question burning in her chest. Why did you really help me? Wait. Adrian was quiet for a long time, long enough that she thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, because I know what it's like, he said softly, to be trapped. He left before she could ask what he meant. Elena didn't sleep. She sat by the window, wrapped in a blanket someone, Carver probably, had left on the bed, and watched the rain turn to mist. Her mind wouldn't stop spinning. Everything that had happened in the last 12 hours felt surreal. Wrong. Like she'd stepped sideways into someone else's nightmare. Yesterday morning, she'd been a daughter. Trapped, yes. Desperate, absolutely. But still tethered to something resembling a life. Now she was, what? A fugitive? A charity case? A pawn in whatever game Adrian Blackthorne was playing? She didn't even know why he'd helped her. His explanation, I don't like bullies, rang true, but incomplete. Men like him didn't act on principle alone. There was always another layer, another angle, and she was going to find it. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Come in, she called, expecting Carver. Instead, a young woman entered, mid-20s, copper hair pulled back in a braid, wearing a simple gray dress. She carried a tray of food and a bundle of clothing. Morning, miss, she said, setting everything down on the table near the fire. I'm Lucy. His Grace asked me to see to you. Thank you. Elena stood, wincing as her battered feet reminded her they existed. You don't have to call me miss. Elena's fine. Lucy smiled, small but genuine. His Grace said you'd say that. Did he? Elena tried not to sound bitter and failed. What else did His Grace say? That you're to be treated as a guest, that no one's to bother you unless you ask, and that anyone who gossips about you answers to him personally. Lucy's smile widened slightly. Cook's been terrified all morning. Despite everything, Elena almost laughed. I'm not that interesting. You jumped into the Duke's carriage in a wedding dress, miss. That's the most interesting thing that's happened here in 5 years. Fair point. Lucy helped her out of the ruined gown. A mercy. Really? Elena never wanted to see it again, and into a simple day dress that actually fit. Then she combed the tangles from Elena's hair with surprising gentleness, talking the whole time about the estate, the staff, the village below. Normal things. Human things. It was the first time Elena had felt like a person instead of a problem in weeks. Lucy, she said quietly, as the maid finished pinning her hair. Can I ask you something? Of course. The Duke. What's he really like? Lucy's hands paused. When she spoke again, her voice was careful. He's fair, pays well. Doesn't tolerate cruelty. Keeps to himself mostly. That's not what I asked. Lucy met her eyes in the mirror. No, it's not. She set down the brush and moved to tidy the room, but Elena caught her wrist. Please, I need to know what I'm dealing with. Lucy hesitated, then sighed. He's not easy. Lost his parents young. Grew up under his uncle's guardianship. Nasty piece of work, that man. Beat the kindness right out of him, or tried to. The scar, she touched her own cheek. That was the uncle. Final fight before Adrian came of age and threw him out. Elena's stomach turned. His own uncle did that? Well, with a fireplace poker. Lucy's expression hardened. His Grace doesn't talk about it. Doesn't talk about much. But he's not cruel. Not like some, just closed off, guarded. I know what it's like to be trapped. Suddenly, his words made terrible sense. Thank you, Elena said quietly, for telling me. Lucy nodded and slipped out, leaving Elena alone with her thoughts and a cold breakfast she couldn't stomach. Adrian was in his study when Carver found him. The girl's awake, the old man reported. Lucy's with her now. Adrian didn't look up from the ledger he wasn't actually reading. Good. Didn't look up from them. Your Grace. Carver's tone held a warning. We need to discuss this. There's nothing to discuss. You've taken in a runaway bride. Lord Harrington's runaway bride. The man has connections, power. He won't let this go. I'm aware. Then why? Because he's a monster. Adrian set down his pen, finally meeting Carver's gaze. And she's desperate. That's a combination I'm familiar with. Carver's expression softened slightly. He'd been with Adrian since childhood, knew the scars that didn't show. You can't save everyone, my lord. I'm not trying to save everyone. Adrian stood, moving to the window. Outside, the gardens were gray and dripping. Just her, for now. And what happens when Harrington demands a return? When he brings the law down on us? Adrian's jaw tightened. Then we'll deal with it. How? He didn't answer. Didn't have an answer, really. He'd acted on instinct last night, something he never did. But when he'd seen her dive into his carriage, soaked and terrified and still fighting, something in him had recognized her. The desperation, the trapped animal panic, the choice between monsters. He'd been there. Different circumstances, but the same suffocating dread. So he'd made a choice. Probably a stupid one. But his. Send word to my solicitor, he said finally. I want everything we have on Harrington. Debts, scandals, anything we can use. You're going to blackmail him? I'm going to make him think twice about pressing this. Adrian turned back to his desk. And I want every document related to the Whitlock family debt. All of it. Carver's eyes narrowed. Why? Because if I'm going to protect her, I need to understand what I'm protecting her from. And what he already knew, what he'd hidden from everyone, including her, was this. He'd held the Whitlock debt for 3 months, bought it quietly, through intermediaries, when he'd first heard Harrington was circling. He told himself it was just business, a good investment, nothing personal. But that was a lie. He'd been watching Elena Whitlock for over a year, not obsessively, not inappropriately, just aware. She was smart, sharp, wasted on a family that saw her as currency. He'd thought about approaching her father, offering to clear the debt in exchange for what? Her hand? Her gratitude? He wasn't that naive, so he'd done nothing, held the debt, waited. And then she'd run. Straight to him. Coincidence, maybe. Or fate's twisted sense of humor. Either way, he wasn't giving her back. Your Grace? Carver said slowly. What exactly are you planning? Adrian smiled, cold, calculated. Insurance. Lunch was awkward. Elena sat across from Adrian in a dining room large enough to host a ball, picking at food she couldn't taste. He ate with the mechanical efficiency of someone who viewed meals as fuel, nothing more. Neither of them spoke. Finally, Elena set down her fork. You wanted the truth. Adrian glanced up. I did. My father gambled. Badly. For years. She forced herself to hold his gaze. He lost everything. The house. The land. Even my mother's jewelry. When the creditors came calling, he made a deal with Lord Harrington. Harrington would clear the debt in exchange for my hand. And you objected. I objected to being sold like livestock, yes. Adrian's mouth twitched. Understandable. Harrington's not... She stopped, searching for words. He's not just cruel, he's sick. There are rumors about what happened to his first wife, his second. They died. They disappeared. Elena's hands clenched in her lap. After months of being locked away, months of screaming in the night, and when they finally died, no one was allowed to see the bodies. Adrian's expression didn't change, but something dark flickered in his eyes. You think he killed them? I think he broke them first. Her voice shook, and I think he was looking forward to breaking me. Silence fell like a guillotine. Then Adrian leaned back in his chair, steepled his fingers, and said, So you ran. So I ran. She lifted her chin, and I'd do it again. Even though it makes you a criminal? Even though... She paused. You said I had to earn your protection. What do you want? He studied her for a long, measuring moment. Then he stood, moved to the sideboard, poured 2 glasses of wine, handed her one. I want, he said carefully, an arrangement. Her stomach dropped. What kind of arrangement? A marriage. The glass nearly slipped from her fingers. Excuse me? Not real. He held up a hand. In name only. A legal shield. If you're my duchess, Harrington can't touch you. The law won't force you back to him. And He paused. I get something I need as well. Which is respectability. His smile was bitter. The scarred duke taking a wife? Society will eat it up. Might even stop treating me like a monster. Elena stared at him, trying to process. You want a fake marriage, for appearances. I want a tactical alliance, he corrected. You get protection. I get legitimacy. We both get what we need without the messiness of actual involvement. It was insane. It was also the only option she had. And if I say no, she asked quietly, then I'll help you leave the country, give you money, a new name, but Harrington will hunt you, and eventually he'll find you. Adrian met her eyes. This way, you stay, you fight, you win. As your wife, as my duchess. He said it like there was a difference. Maybe there was. Elena stood, crossed to the window. Outside, the garden stretched toward the distant tree line. Freedom, just out of reach, always out of reach, unless she grabbed it with both hands and refused to let go. She turned back to Adrian. One condition. Name it. I'm not your possession, not your property, not your anything except your ally. Her voice was steel. We're equals in this, or I walk. Something like respect flickered across his face. Agreed. And when this is over, when Harrington's dealt with, I'm free to leave. No strings. No strings, he echoed. She searched his expression for the lie, the trap, found only cold, calculated honesty. All right, Mel, she said. I'll marry you. Adrian raised his glass. To strategic partnerships. Elena raised hers, hands steadier than they had any right to be. To survival. They drank. And somewhere in London, Lord Harrington received word that his runaway bride had just become untouchable. He smiled. Because he'd been hunting prey his whole life. And the chase was always better than the kill. The wedding happened 3 days later. Not in a church. Not with guests or flowers or any pretense of romance. Just Adrian, Elena, a magistrate who asked no questions, and Carver as witness. The whole thing took less than 10 minutes. Elena signed her name in handwriting that didn't shake. She wouldn't give anyone that satisfaction, and became the Duchess of Ravensmore before lunch. Afterward, Adrian disappeared into his study like he'd completed a particularly tedious piece of business, which, Elena supposed, he had. She stood in the hallway, staring at the gold band on her finger, simple, unadorned, cold, and tried to figure out what she was supposed to feel. Relief? Terror? Triumph? Mostly, she just felt numb. Bit anticlimactic, wasn't it? Lucy appeared at her elbow, gentle as always. For a duchess, I mean. Elena laughed, sharp, brittle. I'm not really a duchess. I'm just wearing the title. That's what being a duchess is, miss. Wearing it until everyone believes it. Lucy smiled. Come on, let's get you settled. Settled turned out to mean learning how to navigate a house that had more rooms than her family's old estate, memorizing staff names, and pretending she belonged in a world that had never wanted her. Lucy helped with the first two. The third was harder. That night, Elena ate dinner alone in her room. Adrian sent word he was occupied, and tried not to think about the fact that she'd traded one cage for another. A prettier cage, maybe, one with better locks. But still, she was just finishing when someone knocked. Not the soft, deferential tap of a servant. A real knock. Demanding. Come in, she called, expecting Carver with some household matter. Adrian stepped through instead. He'd changed from his wedding clothes into something more casual, still black, because apparently the man owned no other color. And he looked tired, like the day had cost him more than he'd let on. We need to talk, he said. Elena set down her fork. About? Harrington. He moved to the window, hands clasped behind his back. I received a letter this afternoon. He's formally demanding your return, threatening legal action. Her chest tightened. Can he do that? We're married now. The marriage is legal, but he's claiming it was obtained under duress. That I coerced you. That's insane. That's Harrington. Adrian turned to face her. He's not going to accept this quietly, which means we need to make the marriage believable. Publicly. How publicly? There's a ball. 3 weeks from now. Hosted by the Duke of Ashford. Biggest social event of the season. Every family that matters will be there. His jaw tightened. Including Harrington. Elena's blood went cold. You want us to attend. I want us to make a statement. He moved closer, eyes locked on hers. Show society that we're a united front, that you chose this, that you chose me. And if I can't do it, if I can't stand in a room with him and pretend everything's fine, then we find another way. Adrian's voice gentled, barely, but enough. But this is the fastest path to ending his claim. If society accepts our marriage, the law will follow. Elena stood, paced to the fireplace. Her mind raced through scenarios, each one worse than the last. Harrington watching her across a ballroom. Harrington whispering poison to anyone who'd listen. Harrington finding some way to destroy the fragile protection she'd bought with a fake marriage. What if he tries something? She asked quietly. What if he doesn't just talk? Then I'll handle it. How? Adrian's smile was dangerous. However I need to. She believed him. That was the terrifying part. She believed he'd burn down half of London if it meant keeping his word. All right, Mr. she said. We'll go. We'll play the happy couple. We'll make him believe it. Elena, but you need to teach me. She turned to face him fully. I don't know how to be a duchess. I don't know how to navigate society. If we're going to pull this off, I need to learn fast. Adrian studied her for a long moment, something like approval flickering across his face. Tomorrow. We start tomorrow. Start what? Everything. He moved toward the door, paused with his hand on the frame. How to walk, how to talk, how to make them believe you were born for this. I wasn't. Neither was I. His smile was bitter. But we're both excellent liars when we need to be. He left before she could argue. Elena stood alone in the firelight, the duchess who wasn't really a duchess, and wondered how long she could keep lying before the truth burned everything down. The training started at dawn. Elena stumbled downstairs, half awake, to find Adrian waiting in the ballroom. He'd pushed all the furniture to the walls, clearing a space the size of a small battlefield. You're late, he said. She glanced at the clock. 6:15 Casti. You didn't tell me when to arrive. Saying. A duchess is never late. Everyone else is simply early. He gestured to the center of the room. Stand there. She obeyed, too tired to argue. He circled her slowly, assessing. Posture, he said. You're slouching. I'm exhausted. Exhaustion is not an excuse. Shoulders back, chin up, Imagine a string pulling you upward from the crown of your head. Elena adjusted, feeling ridiculous. Better? Barely. He stopped in front of her. When you enter a room, you own it. Not with arrogance, that's tacky. With certainty. You belong there. Everyone else is a guest in your world. That's the most arrogant thing I've ever heard. Yes. But if you believe it, they will too. He offered his arm. Now, walk with me. They crossed the ballroom 3 times before he stopped her. You're rushing. Slow down. A duchess doesn't hurry. She sets the pace. What if I need to escape quickly? Then you exit with purpose, not panic. His mouth twitched. Trust me, I've had to do both. They practiced for hours. Walking, turning, how to hold a fan, a glass of wine, a conversation with someone she despised. Adrian was a brutal teacher, precise, demanding, offering no comfort when she stumbled. But he was also patient in his own cold way. When she got something right, he acknowledged it. When she failed, he showed her how to fix it. By midday, Elena's feet ached and her head pounded, but she could cross a room like she owned it. Good, Adrian said, the closest he'd come to praise. Now the hard part. That wasn't the hard part? He smiled, sharp, humorless. That was mechanics. Now we work on lies. He had her practice answers to questions she dreaded. Where did you meet? How did he propose? When did you know you loved him? Each response had to sound natural, spontaneous, true. No hesitation, no cracks in the story. Tell me, Adrian said, playing the role of some nosy society matron. How does it feel to be married to such a fearsome man? Elena smiled, the way he'd taught her, warm but mysterious. Fearsome? I find him rather charming. Delivery's good, but you need to sell it with your eyes. Look at me like I'm the only person in the room who matters. She tried, failed, tried again. Better, he said. Again. They ran through scenarios until the lies felt almost real. Until Elena could look at Adrian in fake affection so convincing it scared her. One more, he said as afternoon faded to evening. The worst-case scenario. Harrington approaches you directly. What do you do? Elena's stomach clenched. I handle it. How? I smile. I stay calm. I remind him that I'm your wife now, and there's nothing he can do about it. And when he threatens you, I don't react. I don't give him the satisfaction. What if he touches you? Her hands curled into fists. Then I break his fingers. Adrian's eyebrows rose. That's not very Duchess-like. I don't care. Good. He stepped closer, voice dropping. Never let him see you afraid. Fear is what he wants, what he feeds on. If you show him steel instead, he'll know he lost. Exactly. They stood there inches apart, breathing hard from hours of practice. For a moment, something shifted in the air between them, something neither of them acknowledged. Then Adrian stepped back. Enough for today. Rest. We'll continue tomorrow. Elena nodded, too wrung out to speak. She made it halfway to the door before his voice stopped her. Elena? She turned. You're doing well, he said quietly. Better than I expected. It shouldn't have mattered, shouldn't have warmed something in her chest. But it did. The days blurred into a routine. Mornings with Adrian, learning to be someone she wasn't. Afternoons with Lucy, who taught her the softer skills, which families held power, which scandals to reference, which topics to avoid. Evenings alone, reviewing everything until her brain felt like it might crack. But slowly, impossibly, Elena began to feel like she might actually pull this off. Until the afternoon, Carver knocked on her door, face pale. Your Grace, he said, still strange to hear. You have a visitor. Elena's heart stopped. Harrington? No, your father. Worse. She found him in the drawing room, looking smaller than she remembered. Grayer. Broken. He stood when she entered, hat clutched in trembling hands. Elena, he breathed. Thank heaven. I was so worried. Don't. The word came out flat, hard. Don't pretend you were worried. He flinched. I know you're angry. Angry? She laughed, and it tasted like poison. You sold me, father, like cattle, like property. And now you're here because what? You want to make sure I went to the right buyer? It wasn't like that. His voice cracked. I had no choice. The debt, there's always a choice. You just picked the one that saved your skin and destroyed mine. Ok, me say, moi. Silence crashed between them. Her father looked at her like she was a stranger. Maybe she was. The girl who'd loved him, who'd believed family meant protection. That girl had died the day he signed her over to a monster. Harrington is furious, her father said finally. He's threatening to ruin us, to take everything. He already did. You gave it to him. Elena, please. If you could just talk to him, explain that this was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. She stared at him, genuinely shocked. You think I accidentally married a duke to escape the man you sold me to? I think you panicked, made a rash decision, but it's not too late. To what? Go crawling back? Her voice rose despite herself. Let Harrington lock me away like he did his other wives? Wait for the day I disappear too? He wouldn't. He would. And you know it. You've always known it. You just didn't care as long as your debts were cleared. Her father's face crumpled. For a moment, she almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then he said, if you don't fix this, he'll destroy what's left of our family. And the last thread of sympathy snapped. There is no family, Elena said quietly. You made sure of that. Now get out. Elena, get out! He left, scurried out like the coward he was, leaving Elena shaking with rage and grief and something darker she couldn't name. She didn't realize Adrian had been standing in the doorway until he spoke. Are you all right? No. She turned to face him, vision blurring. But I will be. He crossed the room, handed her a glass of something amber. She drank without asking what it was. Whiskey. It burned. He'll try again, Adrian said. Your father, he's desperate. Desperate people are dangerous. Let him try. Her hands tightened on the glass. I meant what I said. I'm done being his daughter. Yeah. Adrian watched her for a long moment. Then carefully, he said, for what it's worth, you're better off without him. I know. She set down the glass before she could throw it. But knowing doesn't make it hurt less. No, it doesn't. They stood in silence, two broken people pretending to be whole, and Elena realized something terrifying. She was starting to trust him. Not completely, not stupidly, but enough that his presence didn't feel like a threat anymore. That should have scared her. Instead, it just made her tired. The ball's in 2 weeks, Adrian said eventually. Are you ready? Elena thought about Harrington, about her father, about every person who'd ever underestimated her. Yes, she said. I'm ready. The dress arrived a week before the ball. Elena stared at it draped across her bed like something out of a fever dream. Deep midnight blue, silk that caught the light and held it. Simple in design but devastating in execution. The kind of dress that made statements without saying a word. His Grace had it made special, Lucy said, practically glowing. From a designer in Paris. Cost more than most people make in a year. Elena touched the fabric. Cool. Expensive. Perfect. I can't wear this, she said. Why not? Because it's too much, too... She struggled for words. Too real. Lucy's expression softened. It's just a dress, miss. But it wasn't. It was armor, a declaration. The moment she put it on, she stopped being Elena Whitlock and became the Duchess of Ravensmore, permanently. Try it on at least, Lucy coaxed. See how it feels. Against her better judgment, Elena did. The dress fit like it had been designed for her body specifically, which she realized it had been. Adrian must have sent her measurements to Paris weeks ago, before she'd even agreed to marry him. She stared at her reflection, barely recognizing the woman staring back. Poised, elegant, powerful. A duchess. You look beautiful, Lucy whispered. Elena didn't feel beautiful. She felt like she was wearing someone else's skin, but maybe that was the point. That night, Adrian requested her presence at dinner. Not a room, not the informal breakfast table. The actual dining room, where they'd eaten exactly once since the wedding. She arrived in the blue dress, because why not? Might as well get used to it. Adrian was already seated, reviewing correspondence. He glanced up when she entered and went very still. "It fits," he said. "You knew it would." "I hoped." He stood, gestured to the seat across from him. "You look like a duchess, like yourself." He said it simply, honestly. Just more so. Elena didn't know what to do with that, so she sat and let the servants bring food she wouldn't taste. They ate in silence for a while. Then Adrian set down his fork. "I need to tell you something," he said, "about the ball, about what might happen." Her stomach dropped. "What?" "Harrington won't confront you directly. He's too smart for that, but he'll spread rumors, poison the well, make people doubt the marriage." "Let him try. We've practiced for this." "I know, but there's more." Adrian's jaw tightened. "He has something, information about me, about my past." Elena leaned forward. "What kind of information?" "The kind that could destroy my reputation, make society question whether I'm fit to hold my title." He met her eyes. "If he uses it, if he makes it public, this arrangement might not protect you anymore. Then we make sure he doesn't use it." "How?" "Us." Elena smiled, cold, calculated. She'd learned from the best. "We beat him at his own game, turn the narrative before he can poison it. You want to leak the information yourself? I want to control it. Whatever he has on you, we tell it first. Our way. Our terms." She paused. "Unless it's something that would hurt innocent people, then we find another way." Adrian stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "You'd risk that? For this arrangement?" "For myself," she corrected. "Harrington wants to use your past to break me. I won't give him the satisfaction." For a long moment, Adrian said nothing, then quietly, "My uncle didn't just beat me, he tried to kill me, twice. The second time I fought back, nearly killed him instead." Elena's breath caught. "The scar, Sham, the scar." He touched it unconsciously. "I was 16. He came at me with a fireplace poker. I took it from him, and..." He stopped. Carver pulled me off before I could finish it. "But the damage was done. My uncle spread rumors that I was dangerous, unstable, a monster. You were defending yourself." "I see." "Society doesn't care about context. They care about scandal." His voice was bitter. "Harrington has witness statements, medical reports, everything he needs to paint me as exactly what my uncle claimed, a violent brute who can't control his temper." Elena processed this. "And you think if that comes out, I'll lose my protection. I think if that comes out, you'll be married to a man society fears, which makes you either complicit or a victim. Either way, you lose." She stood, moved around the table until she was beside him. "Then we make them see the truth, not the monster your uncle created, the man who survived." Adrian looked up at her, something raw in his expression. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you kept your word." She said it simply. "You protected me when you didn't have to. Now I'm protecting you." "This isn't your fight. It became my fight the moment I signed my name." Elena straightened. "So here's what we're going to do. At the ball, we tell the story, your story, before Harrington can twist it. We make it about survival, not violence. Society won't care. Society loves a good redemption story. Orphaned duke overcomes abusive guardian? That's dramatic. That's compelling. That makes you sympathetic, not scary." Adrian stood, towering over her. "And if it doesn't work, then we leave. Start over somewhere Harrington can't reach." She held his gaze. "But I think it will work, because people want to believe in heroes. We just have to give them one." He searched her face, looking for the lie, the angle, found only fierce, stubborn determination. "All right," he said finally. "We do it your way." Elena nodded, started to move away. His hand caught her wrist, gentle, careful. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Don't thank me yet. We haven't survived the ball." "What?" Still. His thumb brushed the inside of her wrist, just once. "Thank you." He released her and left the room, leaving Elena standing there with her pulse hammering and the sudden, Terrifying realization that this fake marriage was starting to feel dangerously real. The day before the ball, everything fell apart. Carver burst into the library where Elena was reviewing etiquette notes, face ashen. "Your Grace, you need to see this." He thrust a newspaper at her. The headline screamed in thick black letters. "Scarred Duke's Dark Past Revealed Exclusive. Witness Accounts of Noble Violence." Below it, a picture of Adrian, younger, the scar fresh and angry, being restrained by servants. Elena's hands shook as she read, every vicious detail, every twisted half-truth. Harrington had done it, released everything early before they could control the narrative. The article painted Adrian as exactly what his uncle had claimed, dangerous, unstable, prone to uncontrollable rages. It mentioned the marriages of convenience that had failed, hinted at dark reasons why women fled his presence. It called him a monster wearing a title. And buried in the final paragraph, almost as an afterthought, questions about his recent marriage to a desperate runaway bride. Was Miss Whitlock coerced? Trapped? Does the scarred Duke's new duchess live in fear? Elena's vision blurred with rage. "Where is he?" she demanded. "His study. But, Your Grace—" She didn't wait. Stormed through the house, threw open his study door without knocking. Adrian sat at his desk, the same newspaper spread before him. He didn't look up when she entered. "I'm calling it off," he said flatly. "The ball. The arrangement. All of it. Like hell you are." "Elena, no." She slammed her hands on his desk. "You don't get to quit. Not now. Not when we're this close." "I'm not quitting. I'm protecting you." He finally met her eyes, and she saw something terrible there. Defeat. "This story, it's worse than I thought. If you're seen with me now, you're finished. Society will destroy you. Let them try. I'm serious." "So am I." She leaned forward. "You think I'm afraid of scandal? I ran away from my own wedding, Adrian. I have nothing left to lose and everything to prove. So here's what's going to happen. We're going to that ball. We're walking in together, and we're making them all eat their words. It won't work. It has to." Her voice cracked, just slightly. "Because if we don't fight back now, Harrington wins, and I refuse to let that bastard win." Adrian stared at her, something breaking in his expression. "Why are you still here? Why haven't you run?" "Because running didn't save me last time." She straightened. "And because you're not the monster they're pretending you are." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." She said it with absolute certainty. "I know what monsters look like, Adrian. I was engaged to one. You're not him." Silence stretched between them, thick with everything they weren't saying. Then Adrian stood, moved to the window. "If we do this, if we go to that ball, it gets worse before it gets better. Harrington will be there. Your father might be there. Every person who's ever looked down on either of us will be watching, waiting for us to fail." "Good." Elena's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Let them watch. Let them see what happens when they underestimate us." He turned back to her, and for the first time since she'd met him, Adrian Blackthorne smiled, really smiled. "You're terrifying," he said. "I learned from the best." They stood there, two people who'd found each other in the wreckage, and Elena realized she wasn't doing this for protection anymore. She was doing it because somewhere along the way, Adrian had stopped being a means to an end and started being, what? An ally, a partner, maybe even a friend. She didn't let herself think beyond that. "Tomorrow night," Adrian said, "we show them who we really are." "Together," Elena agreed. And somewhere in London, Harrington read the same newspaper article and smiled because he'd just started a war. What he didn't know yet was that Elena Whitlock had already decided how it would end. The night of the ball arrived with the weight of an execution. Elena stood in front of the mirror while Lucy fastened the final clasp of her necklace. Sapphires that matched the dress, borrowed from the Blackthorne vault. They felt like ice against her throat. "You'll be magnificent," Lucy whispered, but her hands trembled as she worked. Everyone knew what tonight was, not a debut, a trial. Elena's reflection stared back at her, poised, elegant, every inch the duchess she'd pretended to become. But underneath the silken jewels, her heart hammered against her ribs like it was trying to escape. She didn't blame it. A knock. Adrian's voice through the door. It's time. Lucy squeezed her hand once, then slipped out. Elena took one last breath, smoothed her dress, and opened the door. Adrian stood in the hallway, devastating in formal black, the scar on his face somehow more pronounced in the lamplight. He looked at her for a long moment, expression unreadable. You look... He stopped, started again. Are you ready? No? She took his offered arm, but let's go anyway, The carriage ride to the Duke of Ashford's estate was silent. Elena watched London blur past the windows, glittering, oblivious, full of people who had no idea their world was about to tilt. Adrian sat across from her, jaw tight, hands clasped so hard his knuckles went white. We can still turn back, he said quietly. We really can't. Elena, if we don't show up, we prove them right. We prove Harrington right. She forced herself to meet his eyes. I won't give him that. Adrian's mouth twitched, almost a smile. You're the most stubborn person I've ever met. Second most. You married me. That got a real smile, brief as lightning. Then the carriage slowed, and through the window, Elena saw it. Ashford House, lit up like a palace, carriages lined up for half a mile. Music and laughter drifted through the night air. Her stomach turned to lead. Remember? Adrian said as a footman opened the door. We don't owe them explanations. We owe them nothing. Bull! Except a show. Elena straightened her shoulders. So let's give them one. They stepped out together. The whisper started immediately. Not loud, not obvious. Just a ripple of shock and speculation that followed them up the marble steps like a wake. Elena kept her chin high, her hand steady on Adrian's arm, and tried not to think about the hundreds of eyes tracking their every move. The ballroom was enormous, chandeliers dripping crystal, walls lined with mirrors that multiplied the crowd into infinity. Women in jewels and silk, men in tailored black, all turning to stare as the majordomo's voice rang out, His Grace the Duke of Ravensmore, and Her Grace the Duchess of Ravensmore. The music didn't stop, the dancing didn't pause, but the quality of the noise changed, became sharper, hungrier. Elena felt Adrian's arm tense under her hand. Steady, she murmured, so quietly only he could hear. They descended the stairs. Every step felt like walking into battle. At the bottom, the Duke of Ashford waited. A round, jovial man with shrewd eyes. His smile was warm, but Elena caught the calculation behind it. He was measuring them, deciding which side of history to stand on. Blackthorn, he said, extending a hand. Glad you could make it. The rumors of your demise were, as they say, greatly exaggerated. Adrian shook his hand, expression neutral. Rumors usually are. Ashford turned to Elena, and his smile shifted, became genuine. And you must be the mysterious bride. I must say, the papers did not do you justice. The papers rarely do anyone justice, Elena said smoothly. But thank you, Your Grace. Clever girl. Ashford's eyes gleamed. I can see why Blackthorn snapped you up. Come, you must meet my wife. She's been dying to meet you. He led them deeper into the crowd, and Elena felt the weight of every gaze like physical touch. Judging, measuring, waiting for her to slip. She didn't. The Duchess of Ashford turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman in emerald silk who looked at Elena like she was solving a particularly interesting puzzle. So, she said, bypassing pleasantries entirely, how did you two meet? Elena had practiced this, had the lie ready, but something made her hesitate, just a fraction of a second. The Duchess noticed. Her eyes narrowed. At a mutual acquaintance's estate, Adrian said smoothly, covering Elena's pause. Last spring, she was visiting family. I was conducting business. We were introduced at dinner. How romantic, the Duchess said, in a tone that suggested she found it anything but. And the engagement was quick, I understand. When you know, Elena said, finding her voice, finding the lie she'd rehearsed 100 times. Why wait? Why indeed? The Duchess's smile didn't reach her eyes. Well, welcome to society, my dear. I hope you survive it. It wasn't a threat, just a statement of fact. They moved through the crowd, making conversation, shaking hands, deflecting questions with practiced ease. Elena smiled until her face ached. Adrian stayed close, a solid presence at her side, and together they performed the fiction of their marriage. But underneath the performance, Elena felt the tension building, eyes following them, conversations stopping when they approached, laughter that cut off too quickly. They were waiting for something, for her to break, for Adrian to lose his temper, for the cracks to show. Then, across the ballroom, Elena saw him. Harrington. He stood near the far wall, surrounded by a cluster of well-dressed sycophants, holding court like a king. Older than Adrian by a decade, handsome in a cold, reptilian way. His eyes found hers across the room, and he smiled. Elena's blood turned to ice. "He's here," she breathed. Adrian followed her gaze. His whole body went rigid. "I see him." "What do we do?" "We ignore him. We don't give him the satisfaction." Yes, Sam. But Harrington was already moving, cutting through the crowd with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no. People parted for him like water. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough to be polite, far enough to be safe. "Blackthorn," he said pleasantly, "what a surprise to see you here. I thought you'd be hiding in that fortress of yours, licking your wounds." Adrian's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed level. "Harrington, still charming people with your wit, I see." "Oh, I don't need wit, just truth." Harrington's gaze slid to Elena. "And speaking of truth, Miss Whitlock, or should I say Duchess? Though I suppose titles are just costumes when you get right down to it." Elena forced herself to smile, to channel every lesson Adrian had taught her. "Lord Harrington, how kind of you to acknowledge my marriage. I wasn't sure you'd received the announcement." "Yes." "Oh, I received it, along with quite a bit of concern from mutual friends. Wondering if you'd been coerced into this arrangement." "Coerced?" Elena let genuine amusement color her voice. "By Adrian? That's absurd." "Is it?" Harrington stepped closer, just slightly, testing boundaries. "You disappeared the morning of our wedding. Threw yourself into his carriage like you were running for your life. And now, 3 weeks later, you're his wife. Forgive me for finding that suspicious." The crowd around them had gone silent, listening. Elena felt Adrian tense beside her, ready to intervene, but she put a hand on his arm, gentle, possessive. "You're right," she said clearly. "I was running for my life. From you." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Harrington's smile froze. "Careful, girl. Slander is a serious accusation." "So is selling a woman to settle debts." Elena's voice didn't shake. "My father promised me to you without my consent. You expected me to honor that bargain. I chose differently. You chose a man you barely knew over a respectable match. I chose freedom over ownership." She stepped forward, meeting his eyes. "And I'd make the same choice every single time." The ballroom had gone deathly quiet. Even the musicians had stopped playing. Harrington's face darkened. "You little—" "Enough!" Adrian's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He moved in front of Elena, not aggressively, but with absolute finality. "You've said your piece, Harrington. Now leave. My wife. Alone." For a moment, Elena thought Harrington would escalate, would push this into something ugly and public. But he was too smart for that. Instead, he smiled, cold, calculating, and stepped back. "Of course," he said smoothly. "I wouldn't dream of upsetting the happy couple. Though I do wonder—" He paused, eyes glittering with malice. "How long will this happiness last? Marriages built on desperation rarely survive the winter." He walked away, his entourage following like jackals. Elena released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The crowd slowly started moving again, conversations resuming in hushed, urgent tones. "That was," Adrian started. "Stupid," Elena finished. "I know. I should have stayed calm, should have played it safe." "I was going to say brave." He looked at her with something like wonder. Reckless as hell, but brave. Before she could respond, the Duchess of Ashford materialized at her elbow. "Well," she said, eyes bright with interest, "that was the most entertaining thing I've seen all season. Come, you need champagne and a moment away from the vultures." She steered Elena toward a quieter corner while Adrian was pulled into conversation by a group of lords. Elena wanted to protest, to stay close, but the Duchess was already talking. "You've made an enemy," she said bluntly. I made an enemy the day I was born female and valuable, Elena replied. The Duchess laughed. Genuine, surprised. I like you. Against my better judgment, but I do. She handed Elena a glass of champagne. Listen, Harrington's dangerous, but he's also arrogant. And arrogant men make mistakes. What kind of mistakes? The kind where they overplay their hand. The Duchess leaned in conspiratorially. I've heard rumors about his first 2 wives, about what really happened to them. Elena's heart stuttered. What kind of rumors? The kind that would destroy him if they were proven. The kind that involved payments to doctors, forged death certificates, women who supposedly died of illness but were actually... She stopped. Let's just say if someone were to investigate properly, they'd find some very interesting discrepancies. Why are you telling me this? The Duchess's expression hardened. Because I was almost his 3rd wife before I met Ashford, before I understood what kind of monster Harrington really was. She paused. You stood up to him tonight. Most women wouldn't dare. That takes steel. So I'm giving you ammunition. What you do with it is up to you. She pressed a small card into Elena's hand, an address in the city, and disappeared back into the crowd. Elena stared at the card, mind racing. Evidence. Real evidence. The kind that could end Harrington permanently. She looked across the ballroom, found Adrian in conversation with the Duke of Ashford, caught his eye. He excused himself immediately, crossing to her side. What happened? He asked, reading her expression. I think... Elena hesitated, then showed him the card. I think we just found our way out. Yes. She told him everything. The Duchess's revelations, the hint about evidence, the address. Adrian's expression grew darker with every word. We can't, he said finally. Can't what? Go after him like this. With rumors and half-truths. If we're wrong, if there's no proof, he'll destroy us. And if we're right, then we're playing a very dangerous game. Adrian took the card, studied it. This address, it's in the slums. Whoever she's sending us to, they're not going to be easy to deal with. I don't need easy. I need answers. Elena, a scream cut through the ballroom, high, terrified, coming from the gardens. The crowd froze. Then chaos erupted as people rushed toward the French doors, toward the sound. Adrian grabbed Elena's hand, pulling her with him as they fought through the crush. Outside, lanterns illuminated a scene from a nightmare. A young woman, barely 20, in a pink dress, stood at the edge of the garden path, sobbing hysterically. 2 men held her back from something in the shadows. Someone had fallen, or been pushed. Elena's stomach dropped as she got closer, as she saw a body, crumpled at the bottom of the stone steps leading down to the lower garden. A woman, judging by the dress, not moving. Who is it? Someone demanded. Someone? I don't know. Someone get a doctor. It's Lady Catherine, a voice called out. Lord Harrington's niece. The crowd went silent. Then, slowly, people turned to look at Harrington, who'd appeared at the edge of the garden, face white as chalk. Catherine? He breathed. No, that's... He pushed through the crowd, fell to his knees beside the body. For a moment, he looked genuinely shattered. Then he looked up, and his eyes found Elena. You, he said, voice shaking with rage. You did this. Elena's heart stopped. What? Someone saw you, arguing with her earlier, near the stairs. Harrington stood, pointing an accusing finger. You were jealous, threatened. You pushed her. That's insane, Adrian cut in, stepping between them. My wife was with me all evening. Was she? Harrington's voice rose. Can you account for every single moment? Because witnesses say otherwise. The crowd murmured, uncertain. Someone had fetched the constable, a nervous man in an ill-fitting uniform who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Your Grace, he said to Elena, voice apologetic but firm, I'm going to need you to come with me, just to answer some questions. She's not going anywhere, Adrian said flatly. Sir, I don't want trouble. Then don't create it. My wife is innocent. This is a setup. Maybe so, but until we sort it out... The constable reached for Elena's arm. Adrian's hand shot out, gripping the man's wrist, hard enough to make him wince. Touch her, Adrian said quietly, and you'll lose the hand. The tension snapped like a wire. Half the crowd gasped. The constable stumbled back, face pale, and Harrington smiled, triumphant, vicious. "There it is," he said. "The famous Blackthorn temper, threatening an officer of the law, protecting a murderess." He turned to the crowd. "You all see it now, don't you? The truth beneath the facade?" Elena's mind raced. This was it. The trap. Perfectly sprung. Either she went with the constable and got buried in accusations, or Adrian protected her and proved every rumor about his violence. Either way, they lost. Unless... "I'll go," Elena said clearly. Adrian's head snapped toward her. "Absolutely not. It's fine." She met his eyes, willing him to understand, to trust her. "I have nothing to hide. I'll answer their questions. Clear this up." "Elena." She touched his face, gentle, deliberate, making sure everyone saw. "Trust me." His jaw worked. For a moment she thought he'd refuse. Thought he'd throw her over his shoulder and carry her out of there himself. Then he nodded. Once. Tight. Elena turned to the constable. "Lead the way." They took her to a room inside the house, Ashford's study, cleared for the occasion. The constable sat her down, pulled out a notebook, and began asking questions in a voice that kept apologizing even as it probed. Where was she between 9 and 10? Had she spoken to Lady Catherine? Had they argued? Elena answered calmly, precisely. No, she'd been with Adrian. No, she'd never met Lady Catherine. No, there was no argument. But even as she spoke, dread pooled in her stomach, because someone had seen her, or claimed to. And in a room full of people looking for scandal, testimony didn't need to be true. It just needed to be believable. The door opened. Harrington stepped in, the constable rising automatically. "My lord, I'm conducting an interview. I have new information." Harrington's voice was smooth, controlled. "A witness has come forward. Lady Margaret saw the Duchess near the stairs at 9:30. Saw her speaking heatedly with my niece." "That's a lie," Elena said. "Is it? Lady Margaret is a respected member of society. Why would she lie?" "Because you told her to." Harrington's smile was ice. "Careful, Duchess. Defamation is a serious charge." The constable looked between them, clearly out of his depth. I'll need to speak with Lady Margaret. Verify the claim." "Of course. Take your time." Harrington moved toward the door, paused. "Though I should mention my niece was going to testify against the Duke, about his violent past, about incidents she witnessed at family gatherings." He looked at Elena. "Quite the coincidence, her dying tonight." The implication hung in the air like poison. Before Elena could respond, the door burst open again. Adrian strode in, Carver at his heels, both looking like they'd just committed several felonies to get there. "Enough," Adrian said. "My wife is leaving. Now." "Your Grace, I can't allow, I don't care what you can allow." Adrian's voice was steel. "Either charge her with something or step aside." The constable wilted. There's not enough evidence yet to..." "Then we're done here." Adrian took Elena's hand, pulled her to her feet. But as they moved toward the door, Harrington stepped into their path. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "Even if she walks tonight, the damage is done. Everyone out there thinks she's a murderer, thinks you're a monster protecting her. Your reputations are ash." "We'll rebuild," Elena said. "From what? You have no allies, no proof, nothing but each other." Harrington leaned in close enough that only they could hear. "And when I'm done, you won't even have that." For a moment, nobody moved. Then Adrian did something Elena didn't expect. He laughed. Low. Genuine. Dangerous. "You think you've won," he said. "You think cornering us makes you powerful. But you've made a critical mistake." "And what's that?" Adrian's smile was a blade. "You've made it personal. And when things are personal, I don't play by society's rules anymore." He pushed past Harrington, Elena's hand still clasped in his, and they walked out into the ballroom. The crowd parted, silent, staring. Elena kept her head high, her hand steady in Adrian's, and they crossed that ballroom like they owned it. Like they hadn't just been accused of murder. Like the world wasn't crumbling around them. At the door, the Dukes of Ashford waited. "There's a back exit," he said quietly. "Might be wise to use it." Adrian nodded. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. This is going to get worse before it gets better." Ashford hesitated. But for what it's worth, I don't think she did it. It wasn't much, but it was something. They took the back exit, climbed into their carriage, and as they pulled away from Ashford House, away from the disaster of the evening, Elena finally let herself shake. That was, she started. A nightmare, Adrian finished. A carefully orchestrated nightmare. He killed her, his own niece, just to frame me. I know. We have to prove it. We will. Adrian's hands were fists. That address the Duchess gave you. We go there tomorrow. Find the evidence. End this. Elena nodded, adrenaline still singing through her veins. They rode in silence for a while. Then Adrian spoke again, voice low. You shouldn't have volunteered to go with the constable. That was reckless. It was necessary. If I'd refused, it would have looked like guilt. If you'd gone, he might not have let you leave. Then it's good you showed up. Adrian looked at her, something fierce in his expression. I would have burned that house down if they'd tried to keep you. Elena believed him. That was the terrifying part. We're in this together now, she said quietly. Whatever happens next. Together, Adrian echoed. And as the carriage carried them through the dark London streets, Elena realized the truth. They'd just declared war. The next morning, they went to the address. It led to a narrow building in the East End, the kind of place where questions weren't asked and answers cost money. Adrian knocked. A woman answered, elderly, sharp-eyed, dressed in black. You're the ones looking for information on Harrington, she said. Not a question. The Duchess of Ashford sent us, Elena said. The woman's eyes narrowed. Then she stepped aside. Come in, quickly. Inside, the house was surprisingly clean, Spartan but maintained. The woman led them to a small sitting room and gestured to chairs that had seen better decades. My name is Mrs. Harding, she said. I was lady's maid to Harrington's first wife, Beatrice. Elena's pulse quickened. What happened to her? What do you think happened? Mrs. Harding's voice was bitter. He killed her, slowly, methodically. Started with isolation, then verbal abuse, then worse. By the end, she was so broken she could barely speak. How did she die? Officially? Fever. Unofficially? Mrs. Harding pulled a small wooden box from a drawer, opened it. Inside were papers, letters, medical notes, receipts. Poison. Arsenic, most likely. I found the bottles hidden in his study, watched him dose her tea every evening for 2 weeks. Adrian leaned forward. Why didn't you go to the authorities? I tried. They laughed me out of the station. A maid accusing a lord? I'd have been tossed in prison for slander. She pushed the box toward them. But I kept the evidence. All of it. Been waiting 20 years for someone to finally use it. Elena's hands shook as she lifted the papers. Letters in Beatrice's handwriting, begging family for help. Medical notes describing injuries consistent with beatings. And most damning, a receipt for arsenic signed in Harrington's hand. This is enough, she breathed. This could destroy him. It's a start, Mrs. Harding said. But you'll need more. His second wife, Margaret, she's still alive. Elena's head snapped up. What? She didn't die. She escaped. Harrington paid doctors to forge a death certificate, but she's been living in Scotland under a different name. If you can convince her to testify... Where in Scotland? Adrian demanded. Mrs. Harding wrote an address on a scrap of paper. But be careful. Harrington has eyes everywhere. If he finds out you're building a case... The front door exploded inward. 3 men burst in, hired muscle, knives drawn, faces covered. One grabbed Mrs. Harding, hand over her mouth. The other 2 advanced on Elena and Adrian. Adrian moved like violence incarnate, grabbed the nearest man's wrist, twisted until bone cracked, took the knife and drove it into the table. The man screamed. Adrian hit him once, hard, precise, and he went down. The second man lunged at Elena. She'd never fought anyone in her life, never thrown a punch. But she'd spent 2 weeks watching Adrian move, learning to read violence. So when the knife came at her, she stepped inside the arc instead of away. Grabbed his arm, used his momentum to drive him into the wall. It wasn't elegant, wasn't skilled, but it worked. The man stumbled, dazed. Adrian was there in a heartbeat, slamming him to the floor. The third man, seeing his companions down, bolted, dragged Mrs. Harding with him. No! Elena started after them, but Adrian caught her arm. Let him go. We can't. A gunshot cracked the air. Elena's ears rang. For a terrible moment, she thought she'd been hit. Then she saw Mrs. Harding slump in the doorway, the man disappearing into the street beyond. Blood spread across the old woman's chest like spilled wine. Elena dropped to her knees beside her. No, no, no! Get a doctor! Too late, Mrs. Harding gasped. Blood bubbled at her lips. He knew. Harrington knew you'd come. Don't talk. Save your strength. The papers! Mrs. Harding pressed the box into Elena's hands with failing strength. End him. Promise me. I promise, Elena choked out. Mrs. Harding smiled. Then her eyes went distant, fixed on something only she could see, and she was gone. Elena sat there, hands covered in blood, holding a box of evidence and a promise she didn't know how to keep. Adrian pulled her to her feet. We have to go. Now. Before more come. We can't just leave her. She's dead, Elena. We're not. Move. He dragged her into the street, into the carriage Carver had waiting. They tore through London's morning traffic, and Elena clutched the box to her chest. Mrs. Harding's blood still wet on her hands. He's escalating, Adrian said grimly. He's not even pretending anymore. Good. Elena's voice was cold, hard. Let him escalate. Let him get desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. Elena, we're going to Scotland. We're finding Margaret. And then we're going to take everything from him the way he tried to take everything from us. Adrian looked at her, really looked, and saw something that made him pause. She wasn't the frightened girl who'd jumped into his carriage anymore. She was something sharper, angrier, forged in fire. All right, he said quietly. Scotland. But we do this carefully, smartly. One wrong move and... The carriage jerked to a stop. Elena looked out the window. They weren't at the estate. They were in the middle of nowhere, road blocked by another carriage. Harrington's carriage. He stepped out, alone, hands spread in mock surrender. I just want to talk, he called. Don't, Adrian said, hand on the door. It's a trap. But Elena was already opening her side. Stay here, she told Adrian. Like hell. He wants me, not you. If we both go out there, it's a fight. If I go alone, maybe I can end this. She met his eyes. Trust me. She didn't wait for an answer. Stepped out into the cold morning air, the box clutched tight. Harrington smiled as she approached. Brave. Stupid, but brave. What do you want? I want you to understand something. He stepped closer. You can't win, even with whatever's in that box. Even with Blackthorn's money and title. I have the law. I have society. I have everything that matters. You had everything, Elena corrected. Past tense. Because you made one critical mistake. And what's that? You underestimated me. She opened the box, showed him the papers. I have evidence, testimony, proof of what you did to Beatrice, what you tried to do to Margaret. And when I'm done, the whole world will know what kind of monster you really are. Harrington's smile didn't waver. You think those papers matter? You think anyone will believe a dead maid and a runaway bride over me? They'll believe Margaret when she testifies, when she tells everyone how you faked her death to keep her quiet. For the first time, something flickered in Harrington's expression. Uncertainty. You don't know where she is, he said. Scotland, living under the name Catherine Ross. Want me to keep going? His face went white, then red, then something terrible and cold. You've just signed your death warrant, he said quietly. No. Elena's smile was sharp as broken glass. I've signed yours. She turned and walked back to the carriage, heart hammering, legs shaking, but her head held high. Behind her, Harrington called out, This isn't over! Elena didn't look back, just climbed into the carriage beside Adrian, who looked at her like she'd grown wings. What did you do? He asked. I made him desperate. She set the box between them. Now we go to Scotland. Fast. Before he can get there first. No. The carriage lurched forward, and Elena watched through the window as Harrington's figure grew smaller, but his words echoed in her mind. This isn't over. No, it wasn't. It was just beginning. They reached Scotland in 2 days of brutal travel, switching horses at every posting station, sleeping in shifts, Adrian's hand never far from the pistol he'd strapped beneath his coat. Elena watched the English countryside give way to Scottish highlands through bleary eyes, Mrs. Harding's blood still under her fingernails no matter how many times she scrubbed. "You should rest," Adrian said as dawn broke over a landscape of mist and heather. "I'll rest when we find Margaret." The address led them to a cottage outside Edinburgh. Small, isolated, surrounded by fields that stretched to the horizon. Smoke curled from the chimney. Someone was home. Elena's heart hammered as Adrian knocked. Silence. Then footsteps. The door opened a crack and a woman peered out. Late 40s, graying hair, eyes that had seen too much. "Margaret Ross?" Elena asked gently. The woman's face went white. "Who's asking?" "My name is Elena Blackthorne. This is my husband, the Duke of Ravensmore. We're here about Lord Harrington." Margaret tried to slam the door. Adrian caught it. "Please," Elena said quickly. "We're not here to hurt you. We're here to stop him." "No one can stop him." Margaret's voice shook. "I tried. I ran. Changed my name. And still, every day I wait for him to find me." "He won't. Not if you help us." Elena pulled the wooden box from her bag, showed Margaret the papers inside. "Mrs. Harding gave us this before she died. Evidence of what he did to Beatrice, what he tried to do to you." Margaret's hands flew to her mouth. "Sarah? Sarah Harding?" "She kept everything, for 20 years. She said you were still alive, that you could testify." "I can't." Margaret backed away. "I won't. If I speak against him, he'll kill me. He almost did once. I barely escaped." "Vad i yacht?" "He's already trying to kill us," Elena said. "He murdered his own niece and framed me for it. Sent men to kill Mrs. Harding when we went looking for evidence. He's not going to stop, Margaret. Not until we stop him." Margaret looked between them, trapped animal panic in her eyes. "You don't understand what he's capable of." "Yes, I do." Elena stepped forward, urgent. "I was supposed to marry him. My father sold me to clear a debt. I know exactly what he is. That's why I ran. That's why I'm here." "What's that?" Something shifted in Margaret's expression. Recognition. Kinship. "Come in," she said finally. "But we can't stay long. If he sent men after you, he'll send them after me too." Inside, the cottage was sparse but clean. Margaret made tea with shaking hands and told them everything. She'd been 19 when she married Harrington. Beautiful, naive, thrilled to be chosen by a lord. The first month was perfect. The second, he started criticizing her dress, her manners, her friends. By the third month, he'd isolated her completely. "He said he was protecting me," Margaret whispered, "from the cruel world, from people who'd take advantage. I believed him." The abuse started small. A slap when she disagreed. A twisted wrist when she tried to leave a room. Then came the locked doors, the withheld meals, the nights where he'd visit her room, and Margaret's voice broke. Elena reached across the table, took her hand. "You don't have to tell us everything. Just what we need to prove he's a monster. Everything proves he's a monster." Margaret wiped her eyes. The beatings, the starvation, the times he'd drug my tea and I'd wake up hours later with no memory of what he'd done. When I finally tried to escape, he caught me, dragged me back, locked me in the cellar for 3 days. Adrian's jaw tightened. "How did you get away?" "It's his physician, Dr. Warren. He saw what Harrington was doing and helped me fake my own death. Gave me something to slow my heartbeat, make me appear dead. Harrington was so eager to be rid of me, he didn't question it, had me buried in an unmarked grave, except Dr. Warren dug me up that same night." She smiled bitterly. "Been dead ever since." Elena's mind raced. "Dr. Warren, is he still alive?" "In London, still practicing. He's the one who forged the death certificate. Will he testify? If you can convince him. He's terrified of Harrington, same as everyone." Margaret looked at Elena with something like hope. "But if you have Mrs. Harding's evidence and my testimony, and his, maybe it's enough. It has to be enough." Elena stood, started pacing. "We go back to London, present everything to the authorities, force them to investigate. They won't." Margaret's voice was flat. Harrington owns half the magistrates in the city. The other half are too scared to cross him. Then we go higher, to Parliament, to the Crown if we have to. Adrian shook his head. They'll bury it, protect one of their own. Not if we make it public first. Elena turned to face them both. We don't go to the authorities. We go to the press. Every newspaper in London. Give them the story, the evidence, the witnesses. Make it so loud they can't ignore it. Margaret's eyes widened. That's brilliant and completely insane. Insane is all we have left. Elena looked at Adrian. What do you think? He was quiet for a long moment, weighing risks, calculating odds. Then he smiled, sharp, dangerous. I think Harrington's about to learn what happens when you back wolves into a corner. They left Scotland that afternoon, Margaret with them despite her terror. She packed a single bag and climbed into the carriage like she was boarding a ship to war. If this doesn't work, she said quietly as they pulled away from the cottage. If he finds me again, he won't, Elena promised. And if he tries, he'll have to go through both of us first. The journey back to London took 3 days. They stopped at every major town, Adrian sending messengers ahead to his contacts in the city. Lawyers, journalists, anyone who owed him favors or hated Harrington enough to risk everything. By the time they reached London's outskirts, half the city knew something was coming. The other half was about to find out. They went straight to the offices of the London Chronicle, the most widely read newspaper in England, run by a sharp-tongued editor named Thomas Pembroke, who'd made his career exposing corruption. He looked up when they walked in, Duke, Duchess, and a ghost, and set down his pen. This should be interesting, he said. Elena laid the wooden box on his desk, told him everything. Beatrice, Margaret, Mrs. Harding, the murdered niece, the attempted frame, all of it. Pembroke listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. When Elena finished, he opened the box and examined the evidence with the careful precision of a man who knew how to spot forgeries. Finally, he looked up. This is enough to hang him. Legally, socially, every way that matters. Then you'll publish? Elena asked. Hell yes, I'll publish. This is the story of the decade. Pembroke's eyes gleamed. But you need to understand something. The moment this goes to print, Harrington will come after all of you with everything he has. Money, lawyers, violence. Are you prepared for that? We're already living it, Adrian said. At least this way we fight back. Pembroke nodded slowly. All right, I'll need statements from all of you. Signed, witnessed, legal. And Miss Ross, he turned to Margaret. You'll need to be willing to go on record. Your name? Your story, all of it. Margaret's hands trembled, but she nodded. I'll do it. Good. Pembroke stood. Give me 2 days, I'll have this fact-checked, corroborated, ready to print. When it hits the streets, every paper in London will follow. Harrington won't be able to buy his way out of this. They spent those 2 days in a safe house Adrian owned in Southwark, a nondescript building that looked abandoned but was actually staffed with former soldiers loyal to the Blackthorn name. Guards at every entrance, eyes on every street. Elena barely slept. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow looked like hired killers. On the second night, Adrian found her standing at the window, staring out at the city lights. Can't sleep? He asked. Every time I close my eyes, I see Mrs. Harding, bleeding out on that floor. Elena's voice was tight. She died because of us, because I dragged her into this. She died because Harrington's a monster. Don't take that on yourself. How can I not? If we'd been faster, smarter, we'd still be exactly where we are. Adrian moved to stand beside her. You can't save everyone, Elena. Sometimes survival is the best we can manage. Is that what you tell yourself? About your uncle? About everyone you couldn't save? He flinched. She'd hit a nerve. I'm sorry, she said quickly. That was true. Adrian's jaw tightened. I tell myself a lot of things, most of them lies. But here's one truth. You're the bravest person I've ever met. And whatever happens next, I'm grateful you're the one standing beside me. Elena turned to face him fully. In the dim light, his scar looked less brutal, more human, a reminder that he'd survived his own monsters. I'm not brave, she said. I'm just out of options. That's when real bravery happens. When you're out of options and you fight anyway. They stood there, inches apart, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. For a moment, Elena thought he might kiss her, thought she might let him. Then footsteps pounded up the stairs and Carver burst in. "The paper's out," he said, breathless. "Early edition. Pembroke rushed it." Elena's heart stopped. "And?" Carver smiled, genuine, fierce. "And London's burning." The headline screamed across the front page, "Lord of Murder, the dark truth behind Lord Harrington's dead wives, exclusive testimony from his deceased second wife." Below it, everything. Mrs. Harding's evidence, Margaret's testimony, the arsenic receipts, the forged death certificate. Doctor. Warren's signed statement admitting he'd helped fake Margaret's death to save her life. And at the end, a call to action, demanding investigation, prosecution, justice. By noon, every newspaper in London had picked up the story. By evening, crowds had gathered outside Harrington's townhouse, demanding answers. By midnight, Parliament had announced an emergency inquiry. Harrington's world was collapsing in real time. Elena stood in the safe house, watching through the window as newsboys hawked papers on every corner, and felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. "It's working," she breathed. "Don't celebrate yet." Adrian's voice was cautious. "He's still dangerous. Maybe more dangerous now that he's desperate." As if summoned by the words, a knock came at the door. The guards tensed. Adrian moved in front of Elena, hand on his pistol. But the voice that called through was familiar. "It's Ashford. Let me in." The Duke of Ashford entered, looking harried but alive, still in evening clothes like he'd come straight from dinner. "You've done it," he said without preamble. "The whole city's talking. Half of Parliament wants Harrington arrested. The other half wants him exiled just to make the scandal go away." "What about the inquiry?" Adrian asked. "Fast-tracked. They'll hear testimony tomorrow. If Margaret's willing..." He looked at her. "If you're willing to testify before Parliament, this ends. He has no way out." Margaret looked terrified, but she nodded. "I'll do it." "There's more." Ashford's expression darkened. "Harrington's fled, left London this afternoon. No one knows where." Elena's stomach dropped. "He ran? Or he's planning something?" Adrian's voice was grim. "Either way, we can't let our guard down. Eat." "I have men watching all the roads out of the city," Ashford said. "If he tries to leave England, we'll know. In the meantime," he turned to Elena, "you should come to the inquiry. Let them see you. Let society see the woman Harrington tried to destroy standing strong. Is that wise?" Adrian's hand tightened on his pistol. "If he's still in the city, then we end this publicly, in front of witnesses, where he can't touch us." Elena's voice was steel. "I'm done hiding. The inquiry was held in Westminster, in a chamber that felt more like a courtroom than a legislative hall. Elena sat in the gallery beside Adrian, Margaret on her other side, and watched as Parliament assembled. Lords in their ceremonial robes, journalists in the press box, guards at every door. And at the center, empty, a chair where Harrington should have been. The Lord Chancellor stood. "We are here to investigate allegations against Lord Edmund Harrington regarding the deaths of Lady Beatrice Harrington and the alleged death of Lady Margaret Harrington, as well as charges of attempted murder and conspiracy. The accused has failed to appear. We will proceed in absentia." A murmur ran through the chamber. They called witnesses. Dr. Warren, who testified about forging Margaret's death certificate under duress. The physician who'd treated Beatrice before her death, who described injuries consistent with repeated abuse. Financial investigators who'd traced Harrington's purchase of arsenic. And finally, Margaret herself. She walked to the witness stand on shaking legs, hands clutched tight. But when she spoke, her voice was clear. She told them everything, every beating, every threat, every day she'd lived in terror. The chamber went deathly silent. "He tried to kill me," Margaret said. "When that didn't work, he tried to erase me. Made the world think I was dead so I could never speak against him. I've been hiding for 20 years, living half a life, because I was too afraid to tell the truth." "And why are you telling it now?" the Lord Chancellor asked gently. Margaret looked straight at Elena. "Because someone was brave enough to stand up to him first. and I couldn't let her fight alone. The chamber erupted, journalists scribbling furiously, lords shouting questions, the Lord Chancellor calling for order. But Elena barely heard it. She just stared at Margaret, this woman who'd been through hell and come back, and felt something crack open in her chest. They weren't victims anymore. They were survivors, witnesses, warriors, and they were winning. The inquiry took 6 hours. By the end, the verdict was unanimous. Arrest warrant issued for Lord Edmund Harrington on charges of murder, attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy. Elena walked out of Westminster into chaos, crowds cheering, journalists shouting questions, society women who'd snubbed her at the ball now trying to get her attention. The Duchess of Ashford pushed through the throng, grabbed Elena's hands. "You did it," she said fiercely. "You actually did it." "We're not done yet. Not until he's arrested." "He will be. Every constable in England is looking for him. It's only a matter of time." But time was the one thing they didn't have. That night, back at the Blackthorn estate, Elena finally allowed herself to breathe. She stood in her room, still in her court dress, and stared at her reflection. The girl who'd jumped into a carriage in a wedding dress was gone. In her place stood someone harder, sharper, someone who'd looked at a monster and decided to fight instead of flee. A knock. Adrian's voice. "Can I come in? It's your house." He entered, looking as exhausted as she felt. "We got word. They found Harrington's carriage abandoned near Dover. He might have fled to France." Elena's heart sank. "So he escaped. Maybe, or maybe he wants us to think that." Adrian moved closer. "I've doubled security. No one gets in or out without my knowledge. You think he'll come here?" "I think a cornered animal does one of two things, runs or attacks." His eyes were serious. "If he attacks, it'll be soon, while he still has resources." "Let him come." Elena's voice was cold. "I'm tired of running." "Elena, I mean it. We've done everything right, built the case, exposed the truth. If he wants a final confrontation, fine. We'll give him one." Adrian studied her for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He pulled a small box from his pocket, opened it. Inside was a ring. Not ornate, just a simple gold band with a small emerald. "This was my mother's," he said quietly. "I want you to have it." Elena stared. "Why?" "Because the ring you're wearing now was just for show, a prop in our arrangement." He took her hand, carefully removed the plain gold band, replaced it with his mother's ring. "This one's real, if you'll have it." Her throat tightened. "Adrian, our arrangement is over. The moment Harrington's arrested, you're free. No strings, no obligations. You can leave, start over, live whatever life you want." He met her eyes. "But I'm hoping you'll stay, not because you have to, because you want to." Elena looked at the ring, at him, at the man who'd protected her when he didn't have to, fought beside her when he could have walked away. "Ask me again," she said, "after this is over, after we know we're safe. Ask me then." "And you'll answer?" "I'll answer." "Well," he smiled, real, warm, unguarded, and for a moment the war outside didn't matter. Then glass shattered downstairs. They both froze. Shouts, gunfire, the sound of fighting. Adrian grabbed his pistol, threw open the door. "Stay here, lock the door behind me." "Absolutely not." Elena grabbed a letter opener from her desk. Useless as a weapon, but better than nothing. "We're in this together. Remember?" They raced downstairs to find chaos. Harrington's men, at least a dozen of them, had broken through the ground floor windows. Adrian's guards fought back, but they were outnumbered. Adrian fired twice, dropping 2 attackers. Elena grabbed a fallen man's knife, threw it at another. It missed, but the distraction let a guard get the upper hand. "Get to the study!" Adrian shouted over the noise. "The safe? There's another pistol." Elena ran, dodged through fighting men, slid into the study, slammed the door, found the safe behind the portrait, fingers shaking as she worked the combination Adrian had taught her. The door swung open. Inside, a pistol, papers, and a ledger. Elena pulled it out, flipped it open. Page after page of transactions, dates, names, amounts. And there, in Adrian's handwriting, Whitlock family debt. Purchased March 15th, total sum £12,000. Her blood turned to ice. He'd owned her family's debt for months, before she'd ever run, before she'd jumped into his carriage. He'd known, all along. The door burst open. Elena spun, pistol raised, and found herself face to face with Harrington himself. He looked terrible, disheveled, desperate, a pistol in his own hand pointed straight at her chest. "Well," he said, "isn't this perfect?" Elena's finger tightened on the trigger. "You should have stayed in France. And miss this? Miss watching everything I built crumble because of one stubborn girl?" Harrington's laugh was unhinged. "No, I came back to finish what I started. You're finished either way. Parliament's issued a warrant. Every constable in England is looking for you. I know, that's why I'm leaving. But not before I tie up loose ends." He gestured with the pistol. "You, Blackthorn, that meddling physician, all of you. You can't kill us all. Watch me." He pulled the trigger. Elena dove left. The bullet slammed into the bookshelf behind her, exploding wood and paper. She rolled, came up firing. Her shot went wide. Amateur. Panicked. Harrington advanced. "You should have stayed married to me. At least then you'd have died comfortable. I'd rather die free." She fired again. This time, the bullet caught his shoulder. Harrington stumbled, face twisting with pain and rage. He raised his pistol, and Adrian crashed through the door like a venging fury. He tackled Harrington before the man could fire, both of them hitting the floor hard. The pistol skittered away. Then it was just fists and fury, two men trying to destroy each other. Adrian had training, skill, cold precision, but Harrington had desperation, and desperation made him vicious. He grabbed a letter opener, the same one Elena had dropped, and drove it toward Adrian's throat. Adrian caught his wrist, twisted. But Harrington was stronger than he looked. The blade inched closer. Elena scrambled for her pistol, found it, raised it, but her hands shook. The men were too close together. If she missed— "Elena!" Adrian's voice was strained. "Do it!" She couldn't risk hitting him. Couldn't— Harrington's elbow caught Adrian in the ribs. He gasped, grip loosening just slightly, just enough. The blade descended. Elena fired. The shot cracked through the study like thunder. Harrington jerked, froze, looked down at the red bloom spreading across his chest. Then he collapsed. Adrian shoved the body aside, scrambled to his feet. Guards poured into the room, weapons drawn, but the fight was over. Elena lowered the pistol, hands still shaking, and stared at what she'd done. She'd killed a man. Self-defense. Necessary. Justified. It still felt like drowning. Adrian crossed to her, gently took the pistol. "It's over. It's done. I killed him. You saved my life." He pulled her close, and she collapsed against him, shaking. "You saved both our lives." Outside, constables arrived, summoned by neighbors reporting gunfire. They found Harrington's body, his men captured or fled, and enough evidence scattered through the study to confirm everything the papers had reported. The war was over. They'd won. 3 days later, Elena stood in the Blackthorn Gardens and watched workers repair the damage to the house. The city was still buzzing with the scandal. Harrington's funeral had been tiny, attended only by distant relatives who wanted nothing to do with his legacy. Margaret had stayed in London, working with Parliament to help other women trapped in abusive marriages. Dr. Warren had been pardoned for his role in the forgery, praised instead for saving a life. And Elena was free. The thought should have thrilled her. Instead, it just felt strange. "You're thinking too loud," Adrian said, appearing at her elbow with 2 glasses of wine. She took one. "Just processing." "Take your time. We've got nothing but time now." Elena sipped the wine, then said carefully, "I found the ledger in the safe." Adrian went very still. "Ah. You owned my family's debt before I ever ran." "Yes." "For how long?" 3 months. Elena turned to face him fully. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it didn't matter." Adrian's voice was quiet. "I bought it to keep Harrington from using it. I never intended to collect, never intended to use it as leverage against you or your family. But you let me think I was trapped, that I had nowhere to go." "No. I offered you an out. The marriage was your choice, your decision. The debt had nothing to do with it." "Didn't it?" Elena's chest tightened. "How much of this was real, Adrian? How much was just—" She stopped, because he was pulling papers from his coat pocket. the same papers from the ledger. And then without a word, he walked to the garden fire pit, tossed them in. They watched together as the debt burned, every pound, every obligation, turning to ash. There, Adrian said. Now it's real. Now there's nothing tying you here except what you want. Elena stared at the flames, at the man who'd just destroyed his only leverage over her. You're an idiot, she said. Probably. That was worth a fortune. I have enough fortunes. Adrian, he turned to face her, and his expression was open, vulnerable. I told you before, when this was over, I'd ask. So I'm asking, stay. Not because you're trapped, not because you owe me, just because you want to. Elena looked at the ring on her finger, his mother's ring, real and solid. She thought about this girl who'd run from her wedding, the woman who'd faced down Parliament, the survivor who'd looked at a monster and pulled the trigger. She wasn't that first girl anymore. She was something new, something forged in fire, and she'd earned the right to choose her own future. Yes, she said simply. Adrian's whole face transformed. Yes? Yes, you idiot. I'll stay. I choose to stay. Das Obamas misbuam. She smiled. But we're doing this as equals, partners. No more secrets. No more games. Partners, he agreed. He pulled her close, and this time when he kissed her, it wasn't for show, wasn't strategic. It was just them. Two people who'd survived hell and found each other on the other side. When they finally pulled apart, Elena rested her forehead against his. What do we do now, G? She asked. Whatever we want. Adrian's smile was fierce. We've got the rest of our lives to figure it out. And standing there in the garden, surrounded by the ruins of the old world and the promise of something new, Elena realized she was looking forward to it. The rest of their lives started with breakfast. Not a grand meal. Not servants hovering with silver platters. Just Elena and Adrian in the morning room, eating toast and drinking terrible coffee because the cook had quit during the attack and no one had hired a replacement yet. This is awful, Elena said, staring at her cup. Truly terrible, Adrian agreed, taking another sip. Why are we drinking it? Because we survived, and survivors don't waste anything. He smiled. Even bad coffee. Elena laughed. Real, unguarded. It felt strange. Good. Then Carver appeared in the doorway, looking apologetic. Your Grace, you have visitors. Elena's stomach tightened. Who? Half of London? Apparently. Carver held out a silver tray stacked with calling cards. The Duchess of Ashford, Lady Pemberton, Mrs. Thornbury, and... He paused. Your father. The room went cold. Adrian's hand found hers under the table. You don't have to see him. I'm she. No, I do. Elena stood, smoothed her dress. But on my terms. In my house, where he can't touch me. She had Carver show her father to the drawing room. The formal one, cold and impersonal. Made him wait 20 minutes before she walked in. He stood when she entered, hat clutched in trembling hands. He looked worse than before. Smaller, grayer, broken. Elena, he breathed. Thank heaven, I saw the papers, the inquiry. I was so worried. Don't. Her voice was flat. Don't pretend you were worried about anything except yourself. He flinched. That's not fair. You're my daughter. I was your daughter. Until you sold me. Elena crossed to the window, put distance between them. What do you want? To apologize. To make amends. You can't. Elena, please, I made a terrible mistake. I was desperate. The debts, the creditors, were your problem, not mine. You made them. You should have faced them. She turned to face him. Instead, you traded me to a monster to save yourself. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. Her father's face crumpled. I know what I did, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life, but you survived. You're safe now. You're a duchess. I'm a duchess because I ran, because I fought, because I refused to be what you tried to make me. Elena's hands clenched. You don't get credit for that. I'm not asking for credit. I'm asking for... He stopped. I don't know what I'm asking for. Forgiveness? I don't deserve it. No, you don't. Elena moved to the door, opened it. But maybe someday I'll give it to you anyway. Not because you earned it, because I'm tired of carrying your mistakes. Her father stood there, lost. What do I do now? You leave. You figure out how to live with what you did, and if you're very lucky, you learn to be a better person than the one who sold his daughter. She paused. Goodbye, father. He left without another word. Elena watched through the window as his carriage pulled away and felt something in her chest unclench. She'd let him go. Not forgiven, not forgotten, just released. Adrian found her there an hour later, still staring out the window. How do you feel, Sia? He asked. Lighter. She turned to face him. Is that wrong? Should I feel worse? You feel however you feel. There's no wrong way to survive family. Elena leaned against him, exhausted. The other visitors. Should I see them? Only if you want to. Adrian's arms came around her. They'll wait. Society always waits when it wants something. What do they want? To be close to power? To say they know the woman who brought down Harrington? To rewrite history so they were always on your side? His voice was dry. Standard aristocratic nonsense. I don't want to play those games. Then don't. We have enough money to ignore society completely if we want. Elena considered this. But if we ignore them, they'll say we're hiding, that we're ashamed. And if we engage, they'll say we're attention-seeking, so we can't win. We already won. Adrian tilted her chin up. Everything else is just noise. But the noise didn't stop. Over the next week, invitations poured in. Dinner parties, garden parties, a personal request from the Queen herself to attend court. Everyone who'd shunned them before now wanted to claim connection. Elena threw half the invitations in the fire. The other half she actually considered. The Queen, she said one evening, holding the royal summons. We can't ignore the Queen. We absolutely can, Adrian replied from his desk, where he was reviewing estate accounts. Adrian, the Queen ignored you when you needed support. Now she wants to be seen with the woman of the hour. It's politics. Everything's politics. Elena set down the summons. But if we don't go, we're making an enemy of the crown. We've made worse enemies. Have we? She moved to stand beside him. Harrington's dead. Parliament's on our side. The papers love us. This is the moment to solidify our position. Make sure no one ever questions us again. Adrian looked up at her, eyes searching. You've gotten strategic. I learned from the best. She smiled. So, do we go to court? He sighed. We go to court. The royal audience was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Elena spent the time preparing, learning protocol, practicing curtsies, memorizing the names and titles of every person who'd matter. Lucy helped, but even she looked nervous. The Queen's particular, Lucy warned. One wrong word and you're done. I've faced worse than royal disapproval. Have you? Because the Queen can destroy your reputation with a lifted eyebrow. Elena thought about Harrington, about the ledger burning, about pulling a trigger to save Adrian's life. Let her try, she said. The day of the audience arrived cold and bright. Elena dressed in emerald silk, the color of Adrian's mother's ring, and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Adrian looked devastating in formal court dress, the scar on his face somehow adding to, rather than detracting from his appearance. They rode to the palace in silence, hands clasped tight. Nervous? He asked, terrified. Good. Means you're paying attention. He squeezed her hand. Remember, she's just a person. Wealthy, powerful, but still just a person. A person who could exile us with a word. She won't. You're too interesting, and the Queen loves interesting people. The palace was exactly as oppressive as Elena had imagined. All gold and marble and portraits of dead monarchs judging everyone who walked beneath them. Courtiers whispered behind fans as they passed. Ladies stared. Men assessed. Elena kept her chin high and pretended she belonged. They were shown to an antechamber and made to wait. An hour. Then 2. Elena's feet ached in her court shoes. Her corset felt like a torture device. Is she making us wait on purpose? She muttered. Definitely, Adrian replied. Why? To remind us who has power. Finally, a door opened. A stern-faced woman in burgundy announced, Her Majesty will see you now. The throne room was smaller than Elena expected. Intimate, almost. The queen sat on a chair that was technically a throne, but looked more like an expensive armchair. She was 60-something, sharp-eyed, dressed in black despite it being years since the prince consort's death. Elena and Adrian bowed and curtsied, held the position until the queen spoke. Rise! They did. The queen studied them with the intensity of someone used to reading people. Her gaze lingered on Elena's face, then the ring on her finger, then back to her eyes. So, she said, you're the girl who broke Lord Harrington. I'm the woman he tried to break, Your Majesty. Elena replied carefully. I just refused to let him. A smile ghosted across the queen's face. Clever, I appreciate cleverness. She turned to Adrian. Ravensmore, I knew your father, good man, died too young. Yes, Your Majesty. You've made quite a mess, both of you. Headlines, scandal, Parliament in an uproar. We didn't intend, Elena started. Don't apologize. The Queen's voice was sharp. I didn't summon you for apologies. I summoned you because I wanted to see for myself what kind of woman brings down a peer of the realm with nothing but truth and stubbornness. Elena didn't know what to say to that. Scene. The Queen stood, moved closer. I receive reports about noblemen who abuse their power, their wives, their staff. Most of the time, there's nothing I can do. The law protects them. Society protects them. But you, she looked at Elena with something like approval. You didn't wait for protection. You made your own. I had help, Your Majesty. Wait. You had allies. There's a difference. The Queen glanced at Adrian. And you, Ravensmore, you could have thrown her to the wolves, saved yourself. Instead, you stood beside her. Why? Because it was right, Adrian said simply. Right. The Queen repeated the word like it was foreign. Most men I know wouldn't recognize right if it bit them. She returned to her throne, settled into it. I'm officially declaring the Harrington matter closed. His title will be revoked posthumously. His estate will go to distant cousins who had nothing to do with his crimes. And you two, she paused, you will attend the winter ball as my personal guests. Elena's heart stuttered. Personal guests of the Queen meant royal favor, protection, legitimacy. Your Majesty is too kind. I'm not kind, I'm practical. I need people in my court who aren't afraid to stand up to corruption. You've proven you're those people. The Queen's gaze was steel. Don't make me regret this. We won't, Your Majesty, Elena promised. Good. Now leave. I have actual state business to attend to. They bowed and curtsied again, backed out of the throne room according to protocol. The moment they were outside, Elena grabbed Adrian's arm. Did that just happen? I think we just became the Queen's new favorite scandal. Is that good? It's leverage. Adrian's smile was sharp, which means it's very good. Oh, boy. News of the royal audience spread through London like wildfire. Suddenly, the invitations weren't just requests, they were demands. Everyone wanted the couple the Queen herself had endorsed. Elena navigated the social season with the same strategic mind she'd used to bring down Harrington. She cultivated allies, made connections, turned every conversation into opportunity. But it was exhausting. 6 weeks after the audience, she stood in yet another ballroom, making polite conversation with yet another duchess, and felt the walls closing in. Excuse me, she murmured, and escaped to the terrace. The night air was cold, clean. Elena breathed it in, trying to remember why any of this mattered. Running away? She turned to find Margaret standing in the shadows, wrapped in a shawl. Just taking a break? Elena said. What are you doing here? Same as you, pretending to enjoy this. Margaret moved to stand beside her. Though I suppose I should be grateful. 6 months ago, I was hiding in Scotland. Now I'm attending balls. It's surreal. Surreal is one word for it. Margaret studied her. You're not happy. I'm not unhappy. I'm just... Elena struggled for words. Tired of performing, of being what everyone expects. Then stop. It's not that simple, isn't it? Margaret's voice was gentle. You spent your whole life being told what to do, who to be. You broke free of that. Don't trap yourself again just because the cage is prettier. Elena stared out at the garden. What do you do when you're tired of fighting? You rest. You remember why you fought in the first place. And then, when you're ready, you fight for something new. Margaret squeezed her hand. You changed my life, Elena. Changed a lot of lives. Women who were trapped saw what you did and found the courage to leave. To speak up. To fight back. That matters. Does it? Because most days it just feels like I traded one performance for another. Then change the performance. You've got power now. Use it. Margaret left her there, alone with her thoughts. Elena stood in the cold for a long time, thinking about what she wanted. What she'd really wanted, underneath all the survival and strategy. When she went back inside, she found Adrian in conversation with a group of lords. She waited until he finished, then pulled him aside. I want to do something, she said. All right, what? Something that matters. Not just attending balls and playing society games. Something real. Adrian's eyes lit up. Tell me. She told him about the women who'd reached out after Harrington's fall. The letters from wives trapped in terrible marriages, asking for help. The pleas from women with nowhere to go and no resources. I want to help them, Elena said. Create something, a place they can go, resources they can use, legal support, safe housing, all of it. That's ambitious. I know, but we have money, connections, the Queen's favor. We could actually do this. Adrian was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he smiled. Let's do it. Just like that? Just like that. He pulled her close. You want to burn down the system that tried to destroy you? I'll hand you the matches. They started small, bought a townhouse in a quiet neighborhood and converted it into a refuge. Hired staff, women who'd been in similar situations, who understood. Put out word through careful channels that there was help available for those who needed it. The response was overwhelming. Within 3 months, the house was full. Women fleeing abusive husbands. Mothers with children and nowhere to go. Girls who'd been sold like Elena almost was. Elena threw herself into the work, helped with intake, listened to stories that broke her heart, connected women with lawyers, doctors, opportunities. It was hard, messy, sometimes heartbreaking, but it mattered. One afternoon, 6 months after they'd started, Elena sat in her office at the refuge and realized something. She was happy. Not perfectly happy. Not without scars or nightmares or days where the weight of everything threatened to crush her, but genuinely, deeply happy. Adrian found her there, staring at a stack of thank you letters from women they'd helped. Penny for your thoughts? He asked. Just thinking about how far we've come. She looked up at him. A year ago I was running from my wedding. Now I'm... She gestured to the office, the letters, the life they'd built. This. Regrets? None. She stood, moved into his arms. Well, maybe one. What's that? That we wasted so much time pretending this was fake, Adrian laughed. We needed the pretending. Gave us cover to figure out the real thing. And what is the real thing? Partnership, trust, love, if we're being honest. Elena looked up at him. Are we being honest? I am. His voice was serious now. I love you, Elena Blackthorne, not because you're convenient, not because you're useful, because you're you. The woman who jumped into my carriage and changed everything. I love you too, she said, even though you're stubborn and controlling and have terrible taste in coffee. I have terrible taste in coffee? He raised an eyebrow. You're the one who... She kissed him to shut him up. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, he said. We're already married. Properly. With witnesses and vows we actually mean. With you in a dress you choose, not one you're running from. Elena's throat tightened. You want to marry me again? I want to marry you for the first time. Really marry you. Choose you in front of everyone. Yes, she said. Yes, absolutely yes. Ikas. The second wedding happened 3 months later, in the gardens of the Blackthorn estate. Small, intimate. Just the people who mattered. Margaret stood as Elena's witness. Carver stood as Adrian's. The Duchess of Ashford attended, along with Lucy and the staff and a handful of women from the refuge who'd become friends. No performers. No spectacle. Just truth. Elena wore blue, the same shade as the dress from that first disastrous ball, but this time by choice. Adrian wore black because some things never changed. The ceremony was short. Traditional vows, but Elena and Adrian had written their own editions. I choose you, Elena said, voice steady. Not because I have to, because I want to. Because you stood beside me when you could have walked away. Because you handed me weapons when you could have tried to protect me. Because you saw me at my worst and loved me anyway. Adrian's voice was rough when he spoke. I choose you because you're the bravest person I've ever met. Because you took your pain and turned it into power. Because you refused to be a victim and became a warrior instead. Because loving you makes me better. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. They exchanged rings, new ones, chosen together. Simpler than the emerald, but more meaningful. And when they kissed, it wasn't for show. It was a promise. The reception lasted until dawn. Music and laughter and stories shared over wine. Elena danced with Adrian, with Margaret, with women from the refuge who finally felt safe enough to celebrate. At some point, the Duchess of Ashford pulled Elena aside. You've done well, she said. Better than I expected. Thanks for the vote of confidence. The Duchess smiled. I mean it. When I gave you that address, I wasn't sure you'd survive long enough to use it. But you didn't just survive. You thrived, changed things. We're just getting started. I know. That's the exciting part. The Duchess raised her glass. To dangerous women who refuse to stay quiet. Elena clinked her glass against it. To dangerous women. Ushi I my instrument. Later, as the party wound down, Elena found herself alone on the terrace where she and Adrian had shared that first real conversation months ago. Margaret joined her, looking tired but content. Strange, isn't it? Margaret said. How different life can be in a year. Strange is one word for it. What would you call it? Elena thought about it, about the girl in the wedding dress, about the woman who'd faced Parliament, about the Duchess who'd built something that mattered. A beginning, she said finally. This whole time I thought I was escaping something, but I was really just finding myself. And what did you find? That I'm stronger than I thought, braver, more stubborn. Elena smiled, and that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing, if you're willing to fight for it. Margaret nodded. For what it's worth, I'm glad you jumped into that carriage. So am I. They stood in comfortable silence, two survivors who'd become more. Adrian appeared in the doorway. The guests are leaving. You should probably... I'm coming, Elena said, but she paused at the door, looked back at the garden where they'd married, at the house that had become a home, at the life she'd built from nothing but desperation and determination. She'd rewritten her fate, not alone, not perfectly, but thoroughly. And she wasn't done yet. Inside, the party was winding down. Women from the refuge saying their goodbyes, promising to visit. Lucy gathering empty glasses with help from new staff. The Duchess of Ashford already gone, leaving a note promising to fund their next refuge expansion. Elena moved through the room, thanking people, accepting congratulations, feeling genuinely grateful for the first time in her life. When the last guest left, she found Adrian in the study, tie loosened, looking at documents spread across his desk. Work? She asked. On our wedding night? Expansion plans for the refuge. He looked up, eyes warm. I think we can afford 3 more houses. Maybe 4 if we're smart about it. Elena crossed to him, looked at the maps and numbers. You're serious? You want to change the world. I want to help you do it. He pulled her onto his lap. Besides, turns out I'm good at logistics. Who knew? She kissed him, slow and sweet. We're going to be insufferable, aren't we? The couple that reformed society. Absolutely insufferable. Adrian's smile was wicked. I'm looking forward to it. Us. They sat there in the firelight, planning their next move. And Elena realized this was what happiness looked like. Not perfection, not ease, but purpose shared with someone who saw all of you and loved you anyway. 6 months later, they opened 3 more refuges across England. A year after that, Parliament passed new laws protecting women's rights in marriage, largely because Elena testified before them, bringing woman after woman to share their stories. Society never fully accepted them. There were always whispers, always people who thought Elena had gotten above her station, always lords who resented being told they couldn't treat their wives like property. Elena didn't care. She'd stopped caring what powerful men thought the day she pulled the trigger that ended Harrington. Instead, she focused on the women who wrote to her, the mothers who'd escaped, the daughters who'd never have to run the way she had. That was the legacy that mattered. On the 2-year anniversary of that first desperate leap into Adrian's carriage, Elena stood in the newest refuge, a beautiful house and bath, and watched women arriving, some with bruises, some with children, all with hope. "Thank you," one woman whispered, clutching Elena's hand, "for showing us we could fight back." "You were always strong enough to fight," Elena said gently. "I just helped you see it." That night, she and Adrian had dinner alone, rare these days. They talked about expansion plans, about the new lawyer they'd hired to handle legal cases, about Margaret's engagement to a kind physician who'd helped with the refuge. But eventually, the conversation turned personal. "Do you ever miss it?" Adrian asked. "The quiet, before all this." No." Elena didn't hesitate. "The quiet was just fear in disguise. This is better. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." She reached across the table, took his hand. "We're doing something that matters, something that will outlive us. That's worth any amount of difficulty." Adrian raised her hand to his lips. "I'm glad you jumped into my carriage." "Technically, I threw myself into your carriage." "Details." His eyes sparkled. "Changed my life either way." "Changed both our lives." They finished dinner and went upstairs to the bedroom that was finally, truly theirs. No pretense, no strategy, just 2 people who'd found each other in the wreckage and built something beautiful from the ruins. Later, as Elena drifted toward sleep in Adrian's arms, she thought about the girl she'd been, terrified, desperate, running in a wedding dress through rain-soaked streets. That girl had been so afraid of the future. If only she'd known. If only she'd known that the worst day of her life would become the first day of everything that mattered, that the duke she'd feared would become her greatest ally, that the cage she'd fled would transform into wings. She'd rewritten her fate, not by waiting for rescue, not by playing by rules designed to destroy her, by refusing to accept the story others had written, by grabbing a pen and writing her own ending. And it was better than anything she could have imagined. "Elena?" Adrian's voice was soft in the darkness. "You still awake?" "Barely. Why?" "Just wanted to say, I'm proud of you, of us, of everything we've built." She smiled against his chest. "We're just getting started." "I know." She felt him smile. "That's the best part." They fell asleep tangled together. 2 survivors who'd become warriors, who'd become partners, who'd become the thing that monsters feared most, people who refused to stay silent. And in the morning, they'd wake up and continue the work. Open more refuges, change more laws, save more lives. Because that's what happened when you stopped running from your fate and started fighting for it instead. You didn't just survive, you transformed everything. Elena Whitlock, duchess, reformer, the woman who'd brought down a lord with nothing but truth and courage, had learned that lesson the hard way. Now she was teaching it to everyone who needed to hear it. You're not trapped. You're not powerless. You're not the story someone else wrote. You're the author. And your story isn't over until you decide it is.